The rain came down cold that November night, the kind that soaked through cheap fabric and settled into your bones. Rosalina Becerra stood under the flickering streetlight at the bus stop on 5th and Morrison, her arms wrapped tight around herself, trying to make her body smaller against the wind. The coat she wore, a Burberry trench that had once cost more than most people's rent, was torn at the shoulder seam, the lining hanging out like exposed insides. She'd been wearing it for 3 weeks straight now. A couple passed by, and she heard the woman's sharp intake of breath, followed by frantic whispering. Then the word that followed her everywhere these days, hissed loud enough for her to hear. Gold digger. Rosalina's throat tightened, but she didn't turn around. She'd learned not to look people in the eye anymore. It only made things worse. They'd recognize her, Rosalina Anderson, the disgraced wife of billionaire real estate developer Jose Anderson. Except she wasn't Rosalina Anderson anymore. The divorce papers had been very clear about that. She pulled the coat tighter and watched her breath fog in the cold air. The shelter didn't open for another hour, and the thought of standing out here, exposed and humiliated, made her stomach twist. But she had nowhere else to go. The benches inside the bus station had armrests specifically designed to prevent people like her from lying down, and the security guard had already kicked her out twice this week. Her phone, an old flip phone she'd bought at a pawn shop with the last of her cash, buzzed in her pocket. Another blocked number. She didn't answer. They were always reporters, or worse, people who'd seen the interviews Jose had given. The ones where he'd sat in his penthouse office, looking wounded and betrayed, explaining how his ex-wife had manipulated him, stolen from his company, and was now trying to destroy his reputation out of spite. The lies had been so perfectly crafted that even she had started to doubt herself in her weakest moments. A sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb, its headlights cutting through the rain. Rosalina instinctively stepped back, her pulse quickening. Rich people didn't stop in this neighborhood unless they were looking for trouble or trying to cause it. She'd learned that the hard way. The back door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than everything she'd lost in the divorce combined. Brown hair, brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. The torn coat, the bus stop, her defensive posture. But there was something in his expression that wasn't pity. It wasn't disgust either. It was something else entirely. Something that made her breath catch. Rosalina Becerra? He said. Not Anderson. Becerra. Her maiden name. The name she'd given up 6 years ago when she'd stood in that cathedral in a dress that weighed 40 pounds and promised to love Jose Anderson until death parted them. The name she'd buried along with every other part of herself that had belonged to her and her alone. She stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. Who's asking? Hi, and welcome to Lumi's Love Library. This is me, quietly putting my writing out into the world for the first time. I'm 25, I love stories, and I believe words still matter, even when you're not sure who's listening yet. If you're here, even by accident, thank you for giving this story a chance. Let's continue. My name is Chandler Harris. He took a step closer, and she noticed he was holding a gold-sealed envelope, the kind that important documents came in. The kind she used to receive when she'd been somebody. I've been looking for you for 3 weeks. Rosalina's hands started to shake. 3 weeks. That's how long she'd been homeless, how long she'd been invisible. I don't have any money. she said, her voice coming out rougher than she intended. If Jose sent you to serve me with something else, I can't. I don't have a lawyer. I don't have anything. Jose Anderson didn't send me. Chandler's voice was calm, steady. Your aunt did. Galia Becerra. The name hit her like a physical blow. Aunt Galia. She hadn't heard that name in years. Not since the wedding, when Galia had pulled her aside and said, "This man will take everything from you, mija. Don't let him erase your name." But Rosalina had been young and in love and certain that her aunt was just bitter, just old-fashioned, just wrong. "Galia's dead," Rosalina whispered. She'd found out from a brief obituary she'd seen in a newspaper someone had left at the shelter. There'd been no funeral invitation, no call. Just a small paragraph noting that Galia Becerra, founder of the Becerra Architectural Group, had passed away at 73. "Yes," Chandler said quietly. "She is. And she left you something." He held out the envelope. Rosalina didn't move. She couldn't. Her body felt frozen, locked in place by fear and confusion and something that felt dangerously close to hope. Hope was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. "I don't understand," she said. "Your aunt," Chandler continued, his eyes never leaving hers, "left you the Becerra Architectural Group, the entire company, the estate, the properties, all of it." He paused, letting the words settle in the space between them. $500 million, Rosalina. It's yours." The world tilted. $500 million. The Becerra Architectural Group, the firm her grandmother had started in the 70s, the one that had designed half the skyline of the city. The firm Rosalina had dreamed of joining when she was a girl, before Jose had convinced her that her talents were better suited to being his wife, his muse, his beautiful accessory. "That's not possible," she said, but her voice cracked. "Galia hated me. She didn't speak to me after I married Jose." "She didn't hate you." Chandler stepped closer, close enough that she could see the rain beating on his shoulders. "She was protecting you, and she spent the last 6 years making sure that when you were ready, when you needed it most, you'd have a way out." He extended the envelope again. "This is that way out." Rosalina's hands were shaking so badly now that she had to clasp them together. "Why now? Why did she wait?" "Because," Chandler said, and for the first time, something hard entered his voice. "She wanted to make sure Jose Anderson couldn't touch it. She knew what he was. She knew what he'd do to you. And she built something that he can't take away." Tears blurred Rosalina's vision, and she hated herself for it. She'd promised herself she wouldn't cry anymore. But standing here in the rain, hearing her name, her real name, spoken with respect for the first time in months, something inside her cracked open. "There's a condition," Chandler added, his tone gentler now. "Galia left very specific instructions." Of course there was. Nothing in her life had ever been simple. "What is it?" Rosalina asked, barely able to get the words out. Chandler's eyes held hers, unwavering. "You have to save Becerra Plaza." The air left her lungs. Becerra Plaza, the crown jewel of her family's legacy. 15 stories of Art Deco brilliance that had stood on the corner of 10th and Grand for 50 years. She'd spent summers there as a child, running through the marble hallways while her grandmother showed her blueprints and taught her about load-bearing walls and the beauty of functional design. "Jose is trying to demolish it," Chandler continued. "He bought the surrounding properties through shell companies. He's planning to tear it down and build a luxury mall. Construction starts in 60 days. The world came back into sharp, brutal focus. Of course. Of course Jose was behind it. He'd always hated that building. Hated that it represented something Rosalina had loved before she'd met him. He'd spent their entire marriage trying to convince her that her family's firm was outdated, provincial, not worthy of her attention, and now he was going to erase it completely. I can't stop him, Rosalina said, hating how defeated she sounded. I'm nobody. The court said I was. The court said a lot of things that weren't true, Chandler interrupted. Galia knew that too. That's why she put safeguards in place. That's why she found me. He held the envelope out one last time. The firm is yours, Rosalina. The resources are yours. The power is yours. All you have to do is take it. She looked at the envelope, at the gold seal gleaming in the streetlight, at this stranger who somehow knew her name, her history, her worth, at the choice. She could walk away, stay invisible, stay safe in her smallness, or she could reach out and take back everything Jose had stolen from her. Her hand moved before her mind caught up. She took the envelope, felt its weight in her palm. It was heavier than she expected, or maybe she'd just forgotten what it felt like to hold something of value. What if I fail? She whispered. Chandler's expression softened just slightly. Then at least you'll fail as Rosalina Becerra, not as someone else's mistake. And standing there in the rain, soaked to the bone and holding a fortune in her shaking hands, Rosalina Becerra began to remember who she used to be, who she still was, underneath all the shame and all the lies. The woman Jose Anderson had tried to erase. The woman her aunt had bet $500 million would rise again. The Becerra mansion looked exactly as Rosalina remembered it. A sprawling Mediterranean revival with terracotta tiles and arched windows that caught the morning light. She stood at the iron gates, Chandler beside her, and felt her chest tighten. She'd been 12 the last time she'd walked through these doors. Galia had been alive then, sharp-eyed and formidable, teaching her niece how to read architectural plans like other grandmothers taught baking. The gate swung open before Chandler could press the intercom. A woman appeared on the front steps, silver-haired and sturdy, wearing a cardigan despite the mild weather. She looked at Rosalina with an expression that made something in her throat catch. Recognition mixed with relief, as if she'd been waiting a very long time. Miss Becerra, the woman said, and Rosalina realized she was crying before she felt the tears on her face. Welcome home. Inside, the house smelled of lemon polish and old wood. Rosalina's footsteps echoed on marble floors she'd once slid across in socks. The woman introduced herself as Connie Smith, head housekeeper, and led them to Galia's study, a room lined floor to ceiling with books and framed blueprints. Another woman waited there, younger, with steel-gray eyes and a briefcase that looked like it had seen war. Edna Freeman, she said, extending her hand, your aunt's attorney, and now yours. Rosalina sank into a leather chair that still smelled faintly of Galia's perfume. I don't understand why she did this. We hadn't spoken in 6 years. Edna exchanged a look with Connie before opening her briefcase. She never stopped watching, Miss Becerra. Your aunt knew what Jose Anderson was long before you married him. She pulled out a thick folder. She had him investigated, multiple times. The room tilted slightly. Galia knew he was isolating you, Connie said quietly, sitting on the arm of the sofa. She saw the way he cut you off from family, from friends, from your own work. Her voice gentled. She knew about the control, The way he made you doubt yourself. Rosalina's hands clenched in her lap. Then why didn't she? Because you wouldn't have listened, Edna interrupted, not unkindly. You were in love, and Jose Anderson is very good at what he does. She slid the folder across the desk. Your aunt spent 6 years building this. Every document you'll need, every piece of leverage. She knew he'd divorce you eventually. Men like him always trade up. She just had to make sure that when he did, when he tried to destroy you completely, you'd have a way to fight back. Rosalina opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were financial records, legal documents, photographs, evidence of Jose's shell companies, his fraudulent deals, his pattern of using and discarding women who threatened to outshine him. She built a trap, Chandler said from where he stood by the window, and Jose Anderson is already inside it. He just doesn't know it yet. Connie reached over and squeezed Rosalina's hand. Your aunt's last words were about you, mija. She said, my girl will remember who she is, and when she does, she'll be unstoppable. Rosalina looked at the evidence spread before her, at these women who'd stood guard over her inheritance, at the home that had been waiting for her to come back to herself. For the first time in 6 years, she felt something shift inside her chest. Not hope, not yet, but something close to it. Anger, clean and clarifying and sharp as glass. Jose found out on a Tuesday. Rosalina knew because her phone, the new one Edna had given her, started buzzing at 7 in the morning with news alerts. She was still in the guest room at the mansion, unused to the weight of real sheets, the silence of a house that didn't smell like disinfectant and desperation. The first headline made her stomach drop. Anderson's ex-wife surfaces with mysterious fortune. Billionaire calls foul play. By noon, Jose was everywhere. Rosalina sat in Galia's study with Chandler and Edna, watching her ex-husband's face fill the television screen. He looked good. He always looked good. Expensive suit, perfect hair, that expression of wounded nobility he'd perfected over years of board meetings and charity galas. Kara Sherwin sat across from him, blonde and sharp-featured, the kind of journalist who'd built a career on other people's misery. Her show, The Real Story, had destroyed careers with less material than this. Jose, thank you for being here during what must be an incredibly difficult time, Kara said, her voice dripping with manufactured sympathy. Jose smiled sadly. I felt I had to speak out, Kara, for my own protection and, frankly, for the protection of my company and everyone who works there. You're referring to the allegations that your ex-wife, Rosalina Anderson. Becerra, Jose corrected smoothly. She's gone back to her maiden name, apparently. Part of this whole reinvention. Rosalina's hands clenched on the armrest. Right. Rosalina Becerra. There are reports she's inherited a massive fortune. Some are saying $500 million. Jose's expression turned grave, pained. Look, I want to be clear. I loved Rosalina. I gave her everything. A beautiful home, a lifestyle most people only dream of. But during our marriage, she had access to sensitive company information, designs, financial records, client lists. He paused, letting it land. And now, conveniently, she's suddenly wealthy? After months of being, well, frankly, unstable? You think she stole from Anderson Development? I think, Jose said carefully, that I'm not the only person asking questions. My legal team is already looking into discrepancies that date back to before our divorce. Intellectual property that went missing. trade secrets that somehow ended up in the hands of competitors. Kara leaned forward. Are you saying she was planning this? That the whole homeless situation was staged? I'm saying that I was married to someone who was very good at playing the victim. His voice dropped, intimate and devastating. Mental health is a serious issue, Kara. Rosalina struggled during our marriage. Paranoid delusions, erratic behavior. I tried to get her help, but she refused treatment. He looked directly into the camera. And now she's got control of a company? Access to that kind of money? I'm worried. Not for myself, but for everyone she might hurt. Rosalina felt the air leave her lungs. Mentally unfit, Chandler said quietly, reading from his phone. That's the phrase his lawyers are seeding everywhere. They're building a competency case. Edna muted the television, her expression fierce. He's trying to have you committed before you can touch the company. If he succeeds, the estate defaults to probate, and with the right judge, he could claim it, Rosalina finished, her voice hollow. On screen, Jose's face was frozen in an expression of concerned nobility. The devoted ex-husband, just trying to protect everyone from his unstable former wife. And watching him, Rosalina realized something. This was exactly what Galia had predicted he'd do, which meant her aunt had already prepared for it. The Becerra Architectural Group occupied the entire 14th floor of the Meridian Tower, all glass and steel and the kind of understated elegance that came from old money and older confidence. Rosalina stepped out of the elevator with Chandler beside her, and for a moment she couldn't move. The lobby walls were covered in photographs, buildings her grandmother had designed, projects that had shaped the city's skyline for half a century. A receptionist looked up, startled. "Can I help? Miss Becerra?" Recognition flickered across her face. "Oh my God, we heard you were coming, but is my office ready?" Rosalina's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Yes, ma'am. Corner suite. I'll show you." "I remember where it is." She walked past the reception desk like she'd done it 1,000 times before, even though her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might crack a rib. The corner suite had been Galia's. Now it was hers. The door had a brass nameplate that read, R. Becerra, Principal Architect. Inside, everything was exactly as Galia had left it. The drafting table by the window, the wall of reference books, the framed sketch of the original Becerra Plaza, her grandmother's handwriting in the margins. Rosalina moved to the filing cabinets, her hand shaking slightly as she opened the bottom drawer. The one marked Personal, 1956-2019. She pulled out a leather portfolio she'd left here 7 years ago, before Jose had convinced her she didn't need to work anymore, that being his wife was work enough. "What is that?" Chandler asked. She laid it on the desk and opened it. Inside were dozens of sketches, design concepts she'd worked on during her marriage when Jose was traveling. Late-night drawings when she couldn't sleep, when the house felt too big and too empty, and she'd needed to remember who she was before she became Mrs. Anderson. Chandler leaned over, studying them. His expression changed. "These are... Look at this one." Rosalina pulled out a sketch of a mixed-use building with distinctive angular balconies and a glass atrium. Her signature was in the corner, dated 4 years ago. Then she opened her laptop and pulled up a website. The Phoenix Tower, downtown, completed last year. On screen was Jose's building. Same angular balconies, same glass atrium, his name on every award, every article. That son of a... There's more. She pulled out another sketch. A waterfront complex with wave-inspired curves. Then another website. The Harbor Collection? That's his too. One Architectural Digest's Building of the Year. Her voice was shaking now, not with fear but with something hotter, something that had been building in her chest since she'd watched him lie on television. This one, the retail plaza on Montgomery? Mine. The restaurant with the retractable roof everyone photographed for Instagram? Mine. The community center the mayor gave him a commendation for? Mine. She spread them across the desk. Her private sketches next to his public triumphs, every award he'd won in the last 4 years, every design that had cemented his reputation as a visionary, all stolen from her. He had access to these? Chandler's voice was tight. I kept them at the house, in my studio, the room he said I could use whenever I wanted. She laughed, the sound bitter. He must have photographed them, probably while I was sleeping. Chandler picked up one of the sketches, studying her signature. Do you have dates? Timestamps? Everything's dated. I always dated my work. She looked at him. Galia taught me that. Then we have him. Chandler's eyes were hard now. He goes on television and calls you a thief, but he's the one who's been stealing. For years. Rosalina stared at the evidence of her own erasure spread across the desk. All those nights she'd doubted herself, wondering if she'd ever really been talented or if Jose had just made her feel special. All those times he'd dismissed her ideas as cute or not quite ready for the real world. He hadn't dismissed them. He'd taken them. The boardroom was designed to intimidate. 20 feet of polished mahogany table, leather chairs that cost more than cars, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Rosalina walked in wearing one of Galia's old suits, tailored, severe, the kind of armor her aunt had worn to every meeting where men assumed she didn't belong. 7 faces turned toward her. 6 men, 1 woman. All of them older. All of them watching her with expressions that ranged from curious to openly hostile. Gentlemen, Chandler said from beside her. Ms. Becerra. The woman nodded. The men didn't move. Let's get this over with. The voice came from the head of the table. Edward Clark, according to the nameplate. Silver-haired, expensive watch. The kind of man who'd spent his whole life being the smartest person in the room and never let anyone forget it. Miss Becerra. Or is it Mrs. Anderson? Hard to keep track. It's Ms. Becerra, Rosalina said evenly, and I'm here to discuss the future of this company. The future. Larry Moses leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. He was younger than Clark, but had the same air of casual dismissal. With all due respect, you haven't set foot in this building in 7 years. Your aunt left you the company? Fine. That's her right. But that doesn't mean you're qualified to run it. What Larry means, Clark said, his tone condescending, is that we've been running Becerra Group very successfully in your aunt's absence. We have projects in development, contracts with the city, relationships that took decades to build. We can't have someone with no experience disrupting. The Becerra Plaza project, Rosalina interrupted. Jose Anderson wants to demolish it. I'm sure you're all aware. Silence dropped over the room like a stone. Anderson Development made a generous offer for the surrounding properties, Clark said carefully. The plaza is outdated. The renovation costs alone would be $12.3 million for a full historic restoration. Rosalina opened the folder Edna had prepared. But we don't need full restoration. The structure is sound. Load-bearing walls are original concrete and steel, last inspected in 2019. The real issue is the facade and the mechanical systems. She slid a document across the table. I've outlined a phased approach, 6.8 million 18-month timeline, and we preserve the Art Deco elements while updating everything else. Clark picked up the document, his expression shifting slightly. You're talking about adaptive reuse, the woman said. Her nameplate read, Patricia Vance. Converting the upper floors? Residential units. Luxury market, but accessible pricing. The ground floor stays commercial. Boutique retail, local businesses. We're not competing with Anderson's Mall. We're offering something authentic. Rosalina pulled out another page. I've already contacted 3 firms interested in pre-leasing the commercial space. Larry Moses leaned forward. And the historic preservation tax credits? 30% federal, 25% state. Plus, the Opportunity Zone designation means additional investor incentives. She looked directly at him. We're not just saving a building. We're creating a profitable project that honors what this company was built on. Clark was reading her proposal now, really reading it. These numbers? You've accounted for the environmental remediation? Asbestos abatement is built into Phase 1, along with new HVAC, upgraded electrical, and ADA compliance throughout. She paused. My grandmother designed that building to last 100 years. We're only halfway there. The room was quiet now, but it was a different kind of quiet. Patricia Vance was nodding slowly. Even Moses looked less dismissive. I'm not here to disrupt anything, Rosalina said. I'm here to save what my family built, and if you can't support that, then I'll find a board that will. Clark set down the proposal. When can you start? Rosalina spread the blueprints across the drafting table in her office, the city lights bleeding through the windows behind her. It was past midnight, but she couldn't sleep. Hadn't been able to sleep properly since she'd walked into this building and remembered what it felt like to create something. You're going to burn out, Chandler said from the doorway. He had his jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking as tired as she felt. I'm fine. She adjusted the scale on the drawing of Becerra Plaza's new addition, a glass and steel wing that would rise from the east side of the original building like something being born. Modern, but respectful. Bold, but not arrogant. I want to call it the Phoenix Wing. Chandler crossed the room, studying the design. It's beautiful. It's a statement. She traced the line of the glass facade with her finger. Jose tears things down. We build them back up. Speaking of building, Chandler said carefully, you're going to need a team. The board approved the project, but Clark made it clear. Any mistakes, and they'll use it as ammunition. Rosalina knew he was right. She couldn't do this alone. But the thought of hiring strangers, of trusting people she didn't know, made her chest tight. What about Claire Joyner? Chandler asked. The name stopped her. Claire? From Anderson Development? Former Anderson Development. Jose fired her 2 years ago, claimed she was insubordinate. He pulled up something on his phone. She filed a discrimination complaint, said he took credit for her designs, and when she pushed back, he blacklisted her. Sound familiar? Rosalina's throat went tight. She remembered Claire, brilliant, sharp, the kind of architect who could see a space and know exactly what it wanted to be. She disappeared from the industry so completely that Rosalina had assumed she'd left architecture entirely. Where is she now? Teaching part-time at the community college, barely making rent. Chandler showed her the phone. She's been trying to get hired for 2 years. No one will touch her because Jose spread rumors she was unstable, stole from the company. The same playbook, the same lies. There's someone else, too, Chandler continued. Leticia Sanchez, structural engineer. Jose fired her 6 months before your divorce. She questioned some of his calculations on the harbor collection project, said the foundation work was substandard. He called her a troublemaker and had her escorted out by security. Rosalina looked up. Was she right? About the foundation? The building's been settling unevenly ever since it opened. 3 lawsuits pending. Chandler's expression was grim. She tried to stop it. He destroyed her career for it. The pieces were falling into place now, a blueprint of Jose's cruelty that extended far beyond just her. How many women had he discarded? How many careers had he ended because they'd threatened his ego, his control, his carefully constructed image? Find them, Rosalina said. Both of them. Tell them I'm offering full salaries, benefits, and their names on every design we produce. They might not trust you, Chandler warned. You were married to him. Then I'll prove I'm not him. She looked at the phoenix wing design, at the building that would rise from the ashes of what Jose had tried to destroy. Tell them we're building something he can't tear down. 2 days later, Claire Joyner walked into her office. Dark-skinned, natural hair pulled back, eyes that held the kind of wariness that came from being burned too many times. She looked at Rosalina for a long moment before speaking. Why should I believe you're any different than he was? Because, Rosalina said quietly, sliding her stolen sketches across the desk. He did it to me too. Claire stared at the designs, recognition dawning across her face. Then she looked up, and something fierce sparked in her expression. When do we start? The call came at 6 in the morning. Rosalina was already awake, reviewing structural drawings with Claire when her phone buzzed. The site foreman, Marcus Webb, his voice tight with controlled panic. Miss Becerra, you need to get down here, now. She and Chandler arrived at the Becerra Plaza construction site 20 minutes later. Yellow caution tape was strung across the entrance. A man in a city inspector's jacket stood near the gate, clipboard in hand, talking to Marcus with an expression of manufactured concern. What's happening? Rosalina approached, Claire and Leticia flanking her. The inspector turned, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Kenneth Robinson, City Building Department. I'm afraid we've found some serious violations, structural integrity issues, unsafe working conditions. I'm going to have to shut this site down pending a full investigation. Rosalina's stomach dropped, but she kept her voice steady. What violations specifically? Foundation work doesn't meet current seismic codes. Support beams are improperly installed. The whole thing's a hazard. He tapped his clipboard. I've documented everything. You'll get the full report in a few days, but for now, all work stops. That's impossible, Leticia said sharply. She was already moving toward the construction area. I reviewed every calculation myself. Everything's not just up to code, it exceeds it. Robinson stepped in front of her. Ma'am, this is a restricted site now. I can't let you... You can't restrict her from her own project, Rosalina interrupted. Something about this felt wrong. The timing was too convenient. Construction had only started 3 days ago, and already they were being shut down. I want to see your documentation. All of it. Robinson's jaw tightened. It's all in order, Miss Becerra. I suggest you contact the building department if you have concerns, but until this is resolved, show me the foundation work you're claiming is deficient. Rosalina didn't move. Right now. For a second, something flickered across Robinson's face. Uncertainty, maybe, or calculation. Then he gestured toward the construction area. Fine, but you're doing this against my professional recommendation. They walked onto the site, hard hats on, Letitia already pulling out her phone to photograph everything. The foundation work was pristine, new concrete, properly reinforced rebar, exactly as the plans specified. Here, Robinson said, pointing to a support beam. See how this connection point is. That's a temporary support, Letitia interrupted. It gets replaced in phase 2. Anyone who actually read the plans would know that. Robinson's expression hardened. I'm telling you it's unsafe. And I'm telling you you're lying. Rosalina's voice cut through the morning air. She'd seen that look before. The one men got when they thought they could intimidate her into backing down. You didn't find any violations. Someone sent you here to create them. That's a serious accusation. Kenneth Robinson. Chandler was looking at his phone, his expression cold. 3 complaints filed against you in the last 2 years for accepting bribes, all dismissed due to lack of evidence. You moonlight as a consultant for Anderson Development. The blood drained from Robinson's face. How much did he pay you? Rosalina asked quietly. How much to shut down my site? I don't know what you're talking about. Marcus, Rosalina said, not taking her eyes off Robinson. Are the security cameras running? The foreman nodded slowly. 24/7, Miss Becerra. Audio and video. Robinson went very still. So we have you on camera, Chandler continued, falsifying an inspection report, attempting to shut down a legal construction site, and now lying about it to the owner. He smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. That's a felony. Multiple felonies, actually. Robinson's hand shook on his clipboard. Look, I was just doing a job. For Jose Anderson, Rosalina finished. Tell him it didn't work. Tell him we're not stopping. And tell him the next person he sends, I won't be this kind. She turned and walked away, her heart pounding but her steps steady. Behind her, she heard Chandler making a call, to the real building department she assumed, to report what had just happened. Claire caught up to her at the gate. That was necessary, Rosalina said. Her hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up. He's scared, Jose. He's actually scared of what we're building. And for the first time since this all began, Rosalina smiled. The Architectural Excellence Gala was held in the grand ballroom of the Regency Hotel, all crystal chandeliers and champagne flutes, and people who'd spent their lives perfecting the art of looking important. Rosalina stood at the entrance, her hand resting lightly on Chandler's arm, wearing a dress that Edna had helped her choose, midnight blue silk that moved like water, simple and devastating. She saw the moment people recognized her. The whispers started like a wave, spreading across the room. Heads turned. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. You ready for this? Chandler asked quietly. No, Rosalina said, but we're doing it anyway. They walked into the ballroom, and she felt every eye on her. Not with pity this time, not with disgust, with something else. Curiosity, maybe, or fear. She was supposed to be broken, homeless, destroyed. Instead, she looked like exactly what she was, a woman who owned a $500 million company and knew it. She spotted Jose near the bar. Of course he was. He always positioned himself where everyone could see him. He wore a tuxedo that probably cost more than the average person's monthly salary, and on his arm was a woman Rosalina didn't recognize. Young, blonde, beautiful in the way that required money and maintenance. That's Melissa Hartley, Chandler murmured. engaged to him for 3 months, fashion model, 24 years old. Rosalina felt something twist in her chest, but it wasn't jealousy. It was pity, for the girl who didn't know yet what Jose Anderson really was. Jose saw her. She watched his expression shift, surprise, then anger, then something like fear before he smoothed it into his public smile. He said something to Melissa, who looked over with obvious curiosity, and then he was walking toward them. "Rosalina," he said, his voice carrying just enough for nearby people to hear. "What a surprise. I didn't know you'd be here." "It's my industry too, Jose. Or did you forget?" She kept her voice light, pleasant. "Congratulations on your engagement, by the way. Melissa, is it?" The young woman smiled, uncertain. "Yes." "You're Jose's ex-wife," Rosalina finished. "Don't worry, I'm not here to make a scene. Just wanted to say hello, and to let Jose know that the Phoenix Wing project is ahead of schedule." Jose's jaw tightened. "How nice. Though I heard you had some inspection issues." "We handled it." Rosalina smiled. "Turned out to be a misunderstanding. The inspector was very apologetic once we clarified things. He's actually being investigated now for ethics violations. Fascinating how these things work out." The color rose in Jose's face, but he kept smiling. People were watching now, a circle forming around them like they could sense blood in the water. "I also wanted to thank you," Rosalina continued, her voice sweet as poison, "for teaching me so much during our marriage, about business, about contracts, about how money moves through shell corporations and offshore accounts." Jose went very still. "Like the ones in the Caymans," she said casually. "And Switzerland. The ones you used to hide assets during our divorce. I'm sure it was just an oversight that you didn't declare them to the court." "I have no idea what you're talking about," Jose said, but his voice had lost its smoothness. "Really? Because I have bank statements that say otherwise, account numbers, transaction histories." She tilted her head. "My legal team found them very interesting. So did the IRS, actually, when we shared our findings." Melissa was looking at Jose now, confusion crossing her face. Around them, phones were coming out. This would be on social media in minutes. "You're making wild accusations," Jose said, his voice rising slightly. "You're unwell, Rosalina. Everyone knows you're a fraud," she interrupted, her voice cutting through his. "You steal from the women around you, their designs, their work, their dignity, and when they figure it out, you destroy them." She stepped closer. "But I'm not destroyed, Jose. I'm standing right here, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you are." She turned to Melissa, her expression softening. "I hope you have a good lawyer. You're going to need one." Then she walked away, Chandler beside her, leaving Jose standing in the middle of the ballroom with his perfect smile finally cracking. The courtroom was smaller than Rosalina expected. She'd imagined something grand, dramatic, but it was just wood paneling and fluorescent lights, and rows of seats filled with reporters who smelled a story worth telling. Jose sat at the defendant's table with 3 lawyers in suits that cost more than most people's cars. He looked calm, composed, like a man who'd never lost anything in his life. Rosalina sat behind Edna, Chandler beside her, and tried to keep her hands from shaking. "The prosecution calls Sarah Vance," the attorney said. A woman stood from the gallery, mid-40s, dark hair pulled back severely, the kind of face that had learned not to show emotion. She walked to the witness stand like she was going to her own execution. Ms. Vance, can you describe your relationship with the defendant? Sarah's voice was steady. I worked for Anderson Development for 6 years. Senior project manager. Jose Anderson fired me in 2022. Why were you terminated? He said I made errors in a client proposal. But the real reason was that I refused to falsify environmental impact reports for the harbor collection project. She looked directly at Jose. He wanted to skip proper geological surveys to save money. I told him it was illegal. He fired me the next day and told every firm in the city I was incompetent. Jose's lawyer stood. Objection. Hearsay and speculation. Overruled, the judge said. Continue, Ms. Vance. I couldn't get work for 2 years. My reputation was destroyed. My savings ran out. I almost lost my house. Her voice cracked slightly. All because I wouldn't help him break the law. The next witness was Lisa Robertson, younger, angrier. She testified about wage theft, about designs stolen and credited to male colleagues, about a pattern of abuse that stretched back years, about how Jose had convinced her she was lucky to work for him, that she should be grateful, even as he took everything she created and put his name on it. By the time she stepped down, the reporters were typing furiously. Then Chandler was called to the stand. He carried a folder, manila and worn, and Rosalina's heart started hammering because she didn't know what was in it. He'd told her to trust him, that he had something that would end this, but he hadn't shown her what. Mr. Harris, you investigated Mr. Anderson's financial dealings, correct? Yes. His shell corporations, offshore accounts, tax evasion, all documented. Chandler opened the folder. But I also found something else. The original divorce filing from Anderson versus Anderson. Jose's lawyer stood immediately. Your Honor, this is outside the scope. It's directly relevant, Edna countered. The divorce settlement forms the basis of Mr. Anderson's claim that Ms. Becerra was incompetent and manipulative. The judge nodded. I'll allow it. Continue, Mr. Harris. Chandler pulled out a document. This is the divorce petition Jose Anderson filed. It claims irreconcilable differences, standard procedure. But this, he held up another page, is the draft he prepared 3 weeks earlier, before he filed officially. What does it say? It claims his wife was mentally incompetent, that she needed to be institutionalized, that he was filing for guardianship to protect her from herself. Chandler's voice was hard. He planned to have her committed so he could control her assets, but his lawyers told him it wouldn't work. She had no psychiatric history, no evidence of instability. So he changed tactics, filed for simple divorce instead, then spent the next 6 months systematically destroying her reputation so no one would believe her when she fought back. The courtroom erupted. Jose was on his feet, his lawyers trying to silence him, but his face had gone red with rage. That's a lie. She was unstable. Everyone saw what you wanted them to see, Chandler interrupted. Just like Sarah, just like Lisa, just like every woman who ever threatened your ego. The judge's gavel came down hard. Order. But it was too late. The damage was done. Rosalina watched Jose's carefully constructed image crack and shatter like glass, and she finally understood what Galia had built. Not just a company, a reckoning. The news broke on a Thursday morning. Rosalina was in her office reviewing the final permits for the Phoenix Wing when her phone lit up with notifications. The first headline made her stop breathing. Real estate mogul Jose Anderson arrested on federal fraud charges. She clicked through to the article. Tax evasion, wire fraud, forgery. The photograph showed him in handcuffs, his perfect hair disheveled, his expression no longer composed but raw with panic. He looked smaller somehow, like a man who'd spent his whole life inflating himself and had finally been punctured. Edna called 30 seconds later. "It's over. The feds moved faster than we expected. He's being held without bail." Rosalina sat down slowly. She'd imagined this moment for months, the vindication, the victory. She'd thought it would feel like triumph. Instead, it just felt like being able to breathe again after holding her breath underwater for 6 years. "Rosalina?" Edna's voice was gentle. "Are you all right?" "Yeah," she said quietly. "I think I finally am." The ribbon-cutting ceremony for Becerra Plaza was scheduled for a Saturday in May. The sun was warm, the sky cloudless, and the plaza looked exactly as Rosalina had envisioned it. The original Art Deco facade restored to its former glory, the phoenix wing rising beside it in glass and steel, modern and classic existing in perfect harmony. Hundreds of people filled the plaza. City officials, architects, journalists, and ordinary people who'd watched the building's transformation and wanted to witness its resurrection. Claire and Letitia stood near the front, both wearing hard hats decorated with the Becerra Group logo. Connie had tears in her eyes. Even Edward Clark looked impressed, though he'd never admit it. Chandler handed Rosalina the scissors, ceremonial and oversized, tied with a blue ribbon. "Ready?" he asked. She looked at the building, at the company logo etched in bronze above the entrance. Becerra Architectural Group, Esther 1956. Her grandmother's dream, her aunt's legacy, her future. "I want to say something first," Rosalina said. The crowd quieted. She hadn't prepared a speech. She'd been too busy actually building to think about what to say when it was finished. But standing here now, she knew what needed to be said. "My Aunt Galia told me once that buildings are like people. They can survive almost anything if their foundation is strong enough." Her voice carried across the plaza. 6 months ago, I didn't believe that. I thought I'd been destroyed, that who I was had been erased completely. She looked at the faces watching her. Claire, who'd gotten her career back. Letitia, whose name was finally on the work she'd created. Sarah and Lisa, who'd stood in a courtroom and told the truth even when it hurt. But Galia was right. The foundation was always there. I just had to remember how to build on it. She smiled, and it felt real, felt earned. This building isn't just about preserving history. It's about proving that what's broken can be made whole again, that what's torn down can rise up stronger. She cut the ribbon, and the crowd erupted in applause. Chandler leaned close as cameras flashed. "How does it feel?" Rosalina looked up at the phoenix wing, at the way the glass caught the sunlight and threw it back brighter than before. She thought about the shelter where she'd slept in borrowed clothes, about the bus stop where a stranger had said her name like it mattered, about every moment between then and now that had required her to choose herself over safety. "Like coming home," she said. Not to a building, not to a company, not to someone else's version of who she should be, but to herself, to Rosalina Becerra, architect, survivor, builder of things that last. The woman Jose Anderson had tried to erase, the woman who'd refused to stay, erased. She stood in the sunlight with Chandler beside her, the phoenix wing rising at her back. And finally, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. If you enjoyed this story, you're welcome to stay. Subscribe to Lumi's Love Library for new stories every day. And if you're not ready to leave yet, There's another story waiting for you in the playlist on your screen right now.